Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're going way back in time and straight into the smoky, creaking heart of a Viking longhouse. You're going to find out exactly what it was like to curl up and try to catch a nap inside one of these ancient homes. Imagine the crunch of snow beneath your boots, the sting of icy wind on your cheeks, and the faint promise of warmth just beyond those thick wooden walls. Sounds cozy, right? Well, sort of. Between the smoke, the smell, and the fact that you'll be sharing your nap space with goats, raiders, and probably a few uninvited critters, you might not exactly drift off like a pampered spa guest. But hey, that's half the fun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love hearing where you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments, too. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The snow crunches under your boots as you trudge up the uneven, frozen path. It's not so much a proper road as a trail stamped down by feet, hooves, and the occasional dragging sled. Your breath puffs out in cloudy plumes that vanish into the gray northern sky. Around you, skeletal trees groan in the wind, their bare branches rattling like bones. Every step brings you closer to the longhouse, a hulking, timber structure that rises low and wide against the pale snow. Its thick turf roof blends into the wintry landscape, like a sleeping animal crouched in the cold. As you get closer, the first thing you notice is the smoke. It curls from a narrow gap along the roof's ridge, a sluggish gray plume drifting into the sky. That's a good sign. It means the hearth fire is going, and with it, the promise of warmth. You quicken your steps despite the ache in your legs and the growing stiffness in your fingers. The walls of the longhouse loom above you, weathered timber planks fitted together like the ribs of a giant wooden ship turned upside down. You pause for a moment at the entrance. It's not much of a door, more like a heavy plank hung across a narrow frame. No grand carvings or fancy decorations here. This isn't a Jarl's feast hall. It's a working household, built to keep out the cold, the wind, and occasionally, the wolves. You push the door open, and it groans on its wooden hinges. A gust of warm, smoky air washes over you, bringing with it the unmistakable sense of firewood, wet wool, animal hides, and something faintly sour, like old milk. You duck your head instinctively. Even if you're not especially tall, the low doorway isn't forgiving. Historians still argue whether the small entrances were meant to trap heat or slow down an enemy trying to barge in. Either way, you don't fancy cracking your forehead on the lintel, so you stoop low. Inside, the light is dim, flickering with the orange glow of the central hearth. The air is thick, smoky, and heavy, curling in low clouds near the roof before sneaking out through the smoke hole along the ridge. It's not exactly breathable bliss. Your lungs tighten a little, and your eyes water faintly, but after the brutal cold outside, even this muggy, fire-scented haze feels like relief. The longhouse stretches out before you, narrow and deep, its walls curving slightly inward like the hull of a ship. That's not an accident. The Norse were master shipbuilders, and they applied the same principles to their homes. Above, heavy beams crisscross the ceiling, supporting layers of turf and sod that insulate the house against the winter winds. The beams groan occasionally as the wood settles, a deep, creaking sigh that sounds almost like the house itself is breathing. People stir inside, some looking up at you with faint interest, others barely acknowledging your arrival. It's hard to tell in the low light, but you spot at least a dozen figures hunched on benches along the walls or crouched by the fire. A few bundled shapes lie curled in the corners, wrapped in rough wool blankets or sheepskins, clearly already dozing. You're not the only one with the bright idea of sneaking a nap in the middle of the long northern day, or night. Honestly, it's hard to tell with these endless twilight skies. A small child scurries past you, barefoot despite the cold, giggling softly as they vanish behind a low-hanging curtain of animal hides. Their laughter is replaced by the faint bleating of a goat tethered near the back wall. You raise an eyebrow. Livestock indoors? Yep. In Viking longhouses, it wasn't unusual to keep animals inside during the harshest months. It added to the heat and the smell. You wrinkle your nose faintly, but hey, warmth is warmth. There's no grand welcome committee. No roaring warriors pounding their chests or horn blasts announcing your arrival. This is real life, not the opening scene of a Netflix series. People here are tired, practical, and focused on surviving the brutal Scandinavian winter. The most you get is a quiet nod from an older woman weaving by the fire and a suspicious glance from a young man sharpening a bone-handled knife. You take a slow breath and step fully inside, letting the heavy door thunk shut behind you. The wind and snow are gone, replaced by the dry crackle of flames and the soft rustle of wool and leather. Your boots creak faintly on the packed earth floor, trodden smooth by countless feet. The longhouse isn't large by modern standards, but to its occupants, it's everything: a shelter, a workspace, a kitchen, a sleeping area, even a temple of sorts when needed. Walls lined with wooden benches double as beds. Above them, shelves hold bundles of herbs, spare tools, and the occasional carved idol. Near the hearth, cooking pots bubble faintly, filling the air with the scent of stewed meat and turnips. It's rustic. Definitely rustic. But oddly comforting. As your eyes adjust to the gloom, you scan the benches and corners, already sizing up where you might sneak your nap. There's space, but not a lot of privacy. The trick will be finding a spot that's warm, not too smoky, and preferably free of animal droppings. Welcome to the Viking version of hotel hunting. Your eyelids feel heavy from the long journey, the warmth of the hearth beckoning. But first, you need to claim your space. You shuffle forward, the soles of your boots pressing into the dirt-packed floor as you take in the scene with quiet calculation. Claiming a place to sleep here isn't as simple as plopping down and closing your eyes. It's a social dance, a subtle negotiation woven from glances, unspoken rules, and the natural pecking order of Viking life. The benches running along the longhouse walls double as sleeping platforms. Thick wooden planks raised slightly off the ground, they're covered with bundles of animal pelts, worn wool blankets, and the occasional lumpy sack stuffed with straw or feathers if you're lucky. The closer to the fire, the better, warmer, cozier, and, for better or worse, smokier. But those prime spots? Already taken. Your eyes drift to a broad-shouldered man sprawled along the bench nearest the hearth. His cloak is patched with fur, his boots are still muddy from whatever grim winter task he's been doing outside, and the axe at his hip glints faintly in the firelight. You don't need to ask to know that spot is off limits. Another figure lies curled nearby, a young woman, her hair braided tightly, with a small leather pouch tied around her wrist. Her eyes are closed, but the tension in her posture suggests that even in sleep, she's aware of who comes and goes. Further down, a cluster of children are huddled together beneath a ragged sheepskin, their small forms rising and falling with slow, uneven breaths. The family spaces, those are even more off-limits than the warrior's spots unless you feel like explaining yourself to a sleep-deprived parent with a knife. The unspoken hierarchy is obvious once you tune into it. The strongest, most respected, warriors, seasoned hunters, elders, claim the warmest, safest areas near the fire. Families cluster along the benches in groups, children tucked close. Newcomers, servants, or travelers like you. You find the leftover spaces, the cold spots near the drafty door, the shadowy corners by the walls, or the hard floor itself. Historians still argue whether this arrangement was strictly enforced or more of a casual, evolving system. Some think the longhouse was rigidly divided by status, others believe it depended on the house, the season, and who happened to be home that night. Either way, you're not about to spark a turf war over a nap. You step carefully, eyes scanning for an opening. There's a narrow bench along the far wall, partially shielded by a hanging hide that acts as a makeshift curtain. Beyond it, the turf roof slopes lower, and the corner fades into deep shadow. It's not exactly prime real estate, the floor beneath it is uneven, and you can already feel a draft sneaking along the wall, but it'll do. As you approach, you pass a low table crowded with wooden bowls, spoons carved from bone, and the remains of a meal, hunks of dark bread, fish bones, and a smear of congealed butter. The lingering smell of smoke and food mingles with the faint, unmistakable odor of wet wool and animal fur. You resist the urge to wrinkle your nose. Compared to the icy wind outside, this place is practically luxury. You ease onto the bench, testing its stability. The wood creaks faintly but holds your weight. A worn pelt, reindeer, by the feel of it, is bunched in the corner. It's stiff with age, but you pull it around your shoulders, grateful for the warmth it offers. A soft snort from nearby draws your attention. You glance down and, sure enough, a goat is curled beneath the bench, its sides rising and falling as it dozes. Its faint, grassy smell mingles with the other scents of the longhouse. You smile to yourself. There are worse bedfellows. As you settle in, the distant murmur of voices floats through the smoky air. Near the hearth, a pair of men speak quietly, their words low and rhythmic. You catch fragments of their conversation, a hunting trip gone wrong, the price of salted fish, the ever-present grumbling about the chieftain's stubbornness. It's the background hum of life here, woven into the walls as much as the timber and turf. You stretch your legs out along the bench, adjusting the reindeer pelt around your shoulders. It's not exactly plush, but after a long day of travel, your muscles sigh with relief. The smoky haze still clings to the air, making your throat prickle, but even that feels oddly comforting in its own way. It reminds you that the fire burns on, that you're inside, sheltered from the biting wind. Your eyes wander to the ceiling beams overhead. Thick, rough-hewn timbers crisscross above, their surfaces darkened by years of smoke and soot. Bundles of dried herbs and garlic dangle from the rafters, swaying faintly in the rising heat. Practical, sure, but also protective, according to old beliefs. The Vikings placed great stock in charms, herbs, and talismans to ward off sickness and spirits. A quirky detail? Absolutely. But considering how drafty this place can be, maybe it's not the worst idea. A soft laugh escapes you as you tug the pelt tighter. You can't help but think of your own modern bed back home, the memory foam mattress, the crisp sheets, the alarm clock glow. Here, it's hard wood, rough wool, and the flickering orange dance of firelight playing across the walls. But there's something grounding about it. Something real. The longhouse creaks softly as the winter wind outside shifts. The turf roof groans under the weight of snow. Somewhere near the door, someone coughs, the sound dry and harsh, echoing faintly in the enclosed space. You adjust your position, feeling the uneven wood beneath your hips, and close your eyes for a moment. The hum of voices continues, low and steady. The goat beneath the bench snuffles in its sleep. The fire crackles, sending occasional sparks into the sooty darkness above. The air is heavy with warmth, smoke, and the faint, earthy scent of damp wool. And for the first time all day, your body begins to relax. Sleep won't come instantly. Between the creaking timbers, the wary glances of strangers, and the general background noise of longhouse life, drifting off is its own challenge. But you've claimed your spot. The first step to napping in a Viking longhouse complete. You shift your weight slightly on the wooden bench, feeling the hard surface press into your hip as the reindeer pelt rustles beneath you. It's not the plush bed you're used to, but after the cold trek and the sharp bite of winter still lingering in your bones, it feels like an upgrade. Now comes the tricky part, actually trying to nap here. See, in a Viking longhouse, the act of finding a spot is only half the battle. Getting comfortable enough to fall asleep? That's where things get interesting. Because even if your body is ready to melt into slumber, this house, like the people in it, never really goes quiet. The hearth fire crackles steadily in the center of the room. It's both a blessing and a curse. The flames radiate a steady, cozy heat that fights back the biting cold seeping through the walls. But they also send up a constant plume of smoke, curling and snaking its way along the rafters before lazily drifting toward the smoke hole in the roof. The smoke hole, by the way, is more of a hopeful suggestion than an efficient ventilation system. Historians still argue whether Viking smoke holes were purposefully designed to keep most of the smoke inside for insulation or if that was just a side effect of their rustic architecture. Either way, your eyes sting a little, and your throat itches as the smoky haze settles over everything like a stubborn fog. You lean your head back against the rough wood of the wall, trying to find that elusive sweet spot between warm and breathable. The fire pops, sending a tiny shower of sparks upward. The scent of burning wood mingles with the earthy aroma of wool, smoke, and old timber. It's comforting in a primal way, like the air itself is laced with the memory of countless winters survived. The hearth itself is a simple, low structure. Flat stones ring the fire pit, blackened with years of soot and ash. Above, a cast-iron cauldron hangs from a hooked chain, swaying slightly as someone ladles out a serving of stew. You can hear the soft clink of wooden spoons against bowls, the muted thump of footsteps across the dirt floor. Despite the longhouse's rough charm, the smoke situation is, well, let's just say you wouldn't exactly pass modern building codes. The air quality leaves a lot to be desired, and the longer you sit here, the more your eyes water and your sinuses tighten. It's not unbearable, but you can see why some folks opt to nap with their cloaks pulled halfway over their faces. Across the room, a young boy does exactly that. Curled beside his mother, he's bundled in a faded wool cloak, the hood drawn tight so only the tip of his nose pokes out. His tiny hands clutch a carved wooden figure, a small, squat likeness of Thor, complete with exaggerated hammer. A quirky detail, sure, but for these people, the gods are as real and present as the smoke in the air. You smile faintly, adjusting your position again as the warmth of the hearth seeps into your limbs. The fire crackles, the smoke curls, and around you, life in the longhouse hums on. Someone near the door stomps the snow off their boots, sending a fresh gust of cold air swirling briefly into the room. You shiver instinctively as the chill creeps along the floor, but it's quickly chased away by the hearth's steady warmth. The newcomer mutters a greeting, and the door thunks shut once more. You close your eyes, trying to tune out the distractions, the faint bleating of the goat under your bench, the occasional clink of tools, the low murmur of voices swapping gossip and plans. It's not silent, not by a long stretch, but the steady rhythm of it all, the fire, the voices, the occasional creak of timber, has its own sleepy cadence. Still, it's hard not to think about the realities hidden beneath the cozy scene. The longhouse might feel like a sturdy shelter now, but life here wasn't exactly a Nordic fairy tale. Winters were brutal, resources scarce, and disease? Well, with this many people packed into one smoky, drafty space, it spread like wildfire. Historians still debate just how common sickness was in these homes, but let's just say you're definitely breathing in a few centuries worth of germs right now. A faint cough from the far end of the room punctuates that thought. You pull the pelt a little tighter, burying your face against its scratchy warmth. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the turf roof and sending a faint shudder through the walls. The longhouse groans in response, a deep, creaking sound that almost feels alive. You remind yourself that these buildings, with their curved frames and turf insulation, are built to flex and breathe with the weather. It's one of the reasons they've survived, some for generations. A few feet away, an older woman stokes the fire, adding another log and sending a fresh cascade of sparks into the air. The flames brighten for a moment, casting flickering shadows along the walls. You watch as the orange glow dances over the rough timber, the animal hides, the bundles of herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. There's something undeniably ancient about this space, something that whispers of generations past huddling around similar fires, listening to the same creaks and sighs, hoping for spring's return. You feel it settling around you, a quiet weight of history pressing into the smoke-hazy air. Your eyelids grow heavier as the warmth seeps deeper into your bones. Despite the smoke, despite the noise, a sense of drowsy calm settles over you. The fire's rhythm becomes a lullaby, the pop of burning wood, the soft sigh of heat rising, the distant hum of voices fading to a low murmur. You curl onto your side, tucking the reindeer pelt close as the world blurs at the edges. The goat beneath the bench snores softly, a thin, wheezy sound that makes you smile even as your mind drifts. The hearth crackles on, the longhouse breathes its ancient, smoky rhythm, and at last, you begin to drift toward sleep. You're not sure how long you've been dozing when a faint sound pulls you back from the edges of sleep. It's not abrupt, not alarming, just part of the endless hum of life inside the longhouse. But as your senses float back to the surface, you become acutely aware of just how much this building holds, how much it conceals within its smoky walls. Even with your eyes still closed, you feel the subtle movement of people nearby. The soft scuff of leather-soled boots on packed earth, the whisper of woolen cloaks shifting, the occasional sleepy grunt or cough. It's as though the longhouse never truly stills, never entirely sleeps. Your nose wrinkles as the familiar smell of smoke and wood mingles with a stronger, more pungent odor drifting in your direction. You crack one eye open, peering toward the source. Ah, of course. Livestock. Over by the wall near the entrance, a pair of sheep doze, their woolly forms curled together in a lumpy heap of matted fleece and twitching ears. Beside them, a low wooden pen holds a sow and a couple of piglets, their small snouts snuffling as they burrow deeper into the straw. You suppress a quiet chuckle. Yep, you're sharing your sleeping space with a full-blown barnyard. It might seem odd from a modern perspective, but this is prime winter survival strategy. The animals bring more than just food, they bring warmth. Their bodies, clustered together in the enclosed space, help raise the temperature. And in return, they enjoy shelter from the bitter cold and prowling predators. Historians still argue whether livestock always stayed inside during winter or if it depended on the household's wealth and space. Some evidence suggests smaller farms kept animals close during harsh weather, while wealthier families had separate byres or sheds. But tonight? In this longhouse? Everyone's under the same roof. You sit up a little, adjusting the reindeer pelt as you stretch your legs. The fire still burns steadily, casting flickering shadows over the timber walls. Across the room, a woman rises from her bed space, her wool dress rustling softly. She makes her way to the hearth, where she stirs the embers with a practiced hand, tossing in a few small logs. The faint smell of burning wood intensifies, chased quickly by a stronger scent, herbs. Bundles of dried juniper, sage, and wild rosemary hang from the ceiling beams, their leaves crackling slightly in the heat as the fire warms the air. Practical, sure, but also protective. Those herbs aren't just for flavor. The Vikings believed certain plants could ward off illness, evil spirits, and all manner of unseen trouble. A quirky belief? Maybe. But you breathe a little deeper, appreciating the earthy aroma mixing with the smoke. The livestock shift again, the goat beneath your bench stretching its legs and letting out a faint bleat. You reach down absently, your fingers brushing the coarse, wiry fur along its flank. It startles for a moment, then settles again, its small body radiating warmth in the chill air. Somewhere in the corner, a rooster lets out a confused, half-hearted crow, not loud, but enough to draw a few tired groans and muttered complaints from nearby sleepers. You can't help but grin. Even the animals are struggling to keep track of time in this dim, flickering space. And that's the thing, it's easy to lose your sense of time in a Viking longhouse. With only the hearth's glow and the faintest hint of daylight squeezing through cracks in the turf roof, the outside world feels distant. Day and night blur, marked only by chores, meals, and the rhythmic pulse of sleep and wakefulness. It reminds you of camping trips or power outages back home, those moments when artificial light vanishes, and suddenly, your body sinks to more ancient cues. Here, nestled among the animals, the fire, and the endless shuffle of people, you start to feel that rhythm creeping in. You glance toward the doorway, where the heavy wooden door remains firmly barred against the cold. Beyond it, winter howls, a low, ghostly wail of wind twisting around the turf walls. The longhouse creaks in response, the thick beams shifting, the thatched roof whispering beneath the snow's weight. It's sturdy, this place, built with more than just practicality in mind. The curved timbers, the overlapping planks, the turf piled thick over the roof, all designed to withstand the worst the north can throw at it. But even with its strength, the longhouse feels alive, almost breathing with the weather outside. Another gust of wind rattles the structure, and the goat beneath your bench snuggles in closer, its body heat welcome against your leg. You pull the pelt tighter around your shoulders, sinking back against the bench as the warmth of the hearth presses in. The livestock settle again, their faint breathing blending with the quiet chorus of the house. Soft footsteps echo faintly as someone crosses the floor, their silhouette briefly illuminated by the firelight. A whispered exchange, a rustle of fabric, the clink of a bowl set down, it's all part of the soundscape now, lulling you back toward the edges of sleep. It strikes you again how communal this life is. There's no privacy here, no locked doors or quiet bedrooms. Everyone shares space, the warriors, the families, the travelers, even the animals. It's both comforting and, let's be honest, a little inconvenient. You wouldn't exactly bring a first date here. Still, there's a raw, undeniable practicality to it all. The livestock contribute more than just noise and smells, they're insurance. Wool for clothing, milk for meals, meat for the leanest days. And in a landscape where survival depends on every resource, every warm body counts. You close your eyes again, tuning into the steady breathing around you, the people, the animals, the soft hiss of the hearth fire. The longhouse hums with quiet life, ancient and familiar, as the winter storm rages unheard beyond the walls. And in this small, smoky, crowded space, with a goat pressed against your legs and a rooster snoring somewhere in the corner, you finally start to drift toward a deeper, dreamier sleep. You wake to the sound of hushed voices drifting through the longhouse, low and steady like the murmur of a distant stream. It takes you a moment to remember where you are, the smoky air, the creak of timber overhead, the faint warmth of the goat still curled near your feet are all reminders enough. The fire in the hearth has burned lower, glowing like the last embers of a forgotten sun. The orange coals pulse softly, throwing just enough light to cast faint, flickering shadows along the walls. Beyond that, the room rests in a twilight haze, equal parts cozy and eerie. You stretch, rolling your shoulders to work out the stiffness, and catch snippets of conversation from across the room. It's not loud, just a quiet exchange between two older men hunched near the hearth, their faces barely visible beyond their shaggy beards and fur-lined cloaks. They speak of the sea, of the coming spring, of sails being mended and ships prepared. Their voices hold the weight of experience, the edges of their words rough with salt and smoke. One of them idly sharpens a seek's, a short Viking knife, the scraping sound adding a rhythmic note to their quiet planning. It's a reminder that while this longhouse feels like a bubble of warmth and safety now, the world beyond its turf walls is far from peaceful. The sea calls, always. And with it comes trade, exploration, and raiding. Historians still argue how much of Viking life was truly dominated by raiding compared to farming, fishing, and trade. The movies love to show horned helmeted warriors storming monasteries, but in reality? Most of these folks spent more time tending sheep than swinging axes. Still, the stories of raiding are real, and they echo here, in the whispers of the men by the fire, their eyes shining with memories and plans. You shift on the bench, your hand brushing over the rough wool of the pelt as you listen. The older man with the knife gestures toward the wall where shields hang in a neat, overlapping row. Their curved wooden faces gleam faintly in the firelight, their iron rims dark with soot and use. Above them, weapons are stored with equal care. Spears, axes, and swords, some simple and worn, others polished and proud. You spot one with a carved hilt in the shape of a dragon's head, its teeth bared in silent threat. A quirky detail, perhaps, but Viking craftsmen loved their animal motifs, dragons, wolves, serpents, all symbols of strength and ferocity. Beside the weapons, tucked high among the rafters, you catch sight of something else: bundles of ropes, sails folded tight, and oars stacked neatly along the beams. Even the ceiling is part storage space here, every inch of the longhouse pressed into service. You can almost picture the longship waiting beyond the frozen shoreline, its sleek hull resting on blocks, its sail furled like the folded wing of some great seabird. When the ice breaks and the fjords run free again, that ship, and the men who whisper of it now, will head for open water. The thought gives you a little shiver, not entirely from the cold. You lie back again, feeling the faint vibration of footsteps through the wooden floor as more people stir. A woman passes, carrying a woven basket filled with fish, dried, salted, and still faintly pungent. Breakfast, probably. Or maybe supper. Time is flexible here, measured more by hunger and chores than by clocks. Someone near the door adjusts a wooden shutter, letting a thin blade of gray daylight pierce the room. It slices across the smoky air, highlighting floating dust motes and the worn lines of timber walls. You squint at the faint glow, realizing morning, or some approximation of it, has arrived. It's easy to forget the outside world when you're nestled deep in the longhouse, the thick turf walls muffling sound and light alike. But beyond them, the north waits, vast, cold, and wild. You remember stories of Viking winters lasting so long and dark that even the bravest warriors grew restless, their minds turning as cloudy as the snow-choked skies. Some historians believe this lingering darkness fueled the culture's hunger for exploration, chasing sunlight, trade, and adventure across the seas. You can understand that urge now. As cozy as the hearth is, the walls feel a little closer, the smoke a little thicker. The cramped space, the constant presence of others, it all makes you itch for fresh air and open ground. But tonight, or this morning, or whatever liminal hour this is, you stay put, wrapped in warmth, soothed by the familiar sounds of life around you. The men by the hearth chuckle softly as they speak, their words blending with the rhythmic creak of the house, the faint bleating of sheep, and the steady breathing of sleepers. A woman hums a low, wordless tune as she tends to the herbs hanging near the ceiling, their fragrant leaves brushing softly against the beams. You wonder briefly what it was like for a child growing up here, falling asleep to the same sounds, waking to the same smells, never truly alone, but never with a moment of privacy either. It's a world without walls, literally and figuratively. A small boy scurries past, bare feet padding over the packed earth floor. His blonde hair sticks out in messy tufts, and his eyes shine as he clutches a carved wooden animal, some kind of stylized horse or stag, its form rough but beloved. He dives under one of the sleeping platforms, giggling as a tired voice calls after him in frustration. You smile, pulling the pelt up to your chin as the longhouse hums with quiet life. It's imperfect, sure, the smoke, the noise, the goats snoring at your feet, but there's something ancient and oddly peaceful in the way it all fits together. The sea may call, the winters may stretch on endlessly, but for now, inside this smoky, crowded, creaking space, there's warmth, safety, and the steady, quiet promise of sleep. The goat at your feet gives a little snort as it shifts, and you stir again, caught between wakefulness and the lure of another nap. It's a peculiar, drifting state, half aware, half dreaming, as the longhouse buzzes gently around you. You roll onto your side and press your cheek against the coarse wool of the pelt. Your nose is filled with its earthy, animal scent, faintly grassy, faintly smoky, and just a little damp from the constant press of bodies in here. Honestly, it's not entirely unpleasant. A weird part of you finds it comforting, like the way an old, well-worn sweatshirt carries the familiar smell of home. Somewhere across the room, a pair of women kneel near the hearth, weaving cords from strips of leather. Their fingers move with practiced ease, twisting and braiding, occasionally pausing to share a quiet joke or hum an old tune. The cords will be used for fastening cloaks, belts, maybe even repairing sandals. Nothing goes to waste here, not time, not scraps of hide, not idle hands. You smile to yourself. It's a scene that could have happened 1,000 years ago, or yesterday in some workshop or crafty friend's living room. The fire crackles softly as one of the women tosses on more wood. The flames flare, licking up toward the low ceiling beams, casting wild, leaping shadows. You follow them lazily with your eyes, watching the way they dance over the carved dragon posts that frame the walls. Those dragons, the stylized, curling beasts, aren't just for show. In Norse culture, they're believed to ward off evil, to guard the household from malevolent spirits, and maybe even intimidate jealous neighbors. Historians still argue whether these decorative carvings were purely symbolic or also served a political, status-driven purpose. Either way, they give the space a fierce, almost magical feel. As the fire burns brighter, more details of the longhouse reveal themselves. You notice a line of ceramic oil lamps perched along the central beam, their simple clay forms smudged with soot. Tiny flames flicker in them, adding to the patchwork of light. It's clever, really. Without modern windows or electricity, every little source of light counts, especially during the oppressive northern winters when daylight barely limps across the sky. You shift again, eyes wandering upward to where the rafters disappear into the gloom. There's storage tucked all the way up there, bundles of dried fish, baskets of herbs, tools neatly tied with twine. It reminds you of the way some modern apartments squeeze storage above kitchen cabinets. The Viking version, practical, organized, and probably a bit dusty. The longhouse itself stretches far longer than it feels from your cozy bench. You realize that beyond the hearth area, past the sleeping platforms and animal pens, there's still more space, a kind of shadowy back section partially hidden from view. Curiosity tugs at you, but the weight of the pelt and the drowsy warmth anchoring your limbs keep you firmly in place. Besides, from what you've heard, that back area might be reserved for the family's most private possessions, or even for honoring the ancestors. That's right. In many Viking households, especially wealthier ones, the longhouse wasn't just a shelter, it was practically a living, breathing museum of family pride. Tucked behind partitions or carved screens, you might find a small shrine with relics, bones, or symbolic objects. A quiet space to remember those who came before. Of course, historians still argue how common these ancestor altars really were. Some suggest they were reserved for chieftains or particularly prosperous farmers. Others think nearly every family kept some token of their lineage nearby, maybe a simple carved stone, or a small offering bowl hidden in the shadows. You find your gaze drifting toward the darker end of the longhouse, wondering what secrets lie beyond. But for now, the space around the hearth feels like the heart of the home, the place where stories are shared, food is prepared, and quiet routines unfold. Someone near the wall starts plucking at a small lyre, a simple, wooden-stringed instrument that produces a soft, almost haunting melody. The notes float through the smoky air, blending with the crackle of the fire and the distant lowing of the livestock. It's beautiful, in that rough, homespun kind of way. You can picture how, centuries ago, this same music might have filled the longhouse on long winter nights, lulling warriors, farmers, and restless children alike into calm. You stretch your legs under the bench, careful not to disturb the goat, and feel your body sink back into a half-doze. The music, the murmured voices, the flicker of flames, all of it wraps around you like a thick, sleepy fog. In your drifting thoughts, you imagine the daily rhythms of life here. Dawn, or as close as you get to it in winter, brings chores, feeding livestock, chopping wood, mending sails or tools. Meals are shared, stories traded, work divided. And when the wind howls loud enough to shake the walls, everyone retreats to the hearth, weaving, carving, playing music, and waiting for the storm to pass. It's simple, maybe. But it's also steady. Anchored. There's a strange security in knowing that your day is shaped not by endless notifications or appointments but by the weather, the fire, and the strength of your own hands. Another gust rattles the door, and the rafters creak, reminding you that beyond these turf walls, the north wind still prowls, sharp as a blade. But inside, wrapped in wool, lulled by music and firelight, you feel distant from it all, tucked safely into the folds of time. The lyre's song slows, its last lingering notes melting into the quiet. The woman with the leather cords finishes her work, tying off the ends with deft fingers. She smiles faintly at her companion, the easy expression of people used to enduring long winters together. And you? You sink back into the pelt, the warmth of the hearth pulling you down again, soft and slow. The longhouse hums, the fire glows, and the endless northern night wraps around you like a story still being told. The next time you stir, the longhouse feels different. It's quieter now, not entirely silent, but softened, like a deep breath has settled over the space. The fire has burned low again, glowing faintly in the hearth, its embers pulsing like sleepy eyes. Your limbs feel heavier, your body still wrapped in the dense warmth of the pelt, but there's a shift in the air, a hush, almost reverent, broken only by the occasional pop of wood or the faint bleat of a goat. You tilt your head, listening. Near the hearth, a man sits alone, turning something small and delicate over in his hands. You squint through the low light, trying to make it out. It's a piece of bone, smooth and carved, no bigger than your palm. He runs his fingers over the markings etched into its surface, his expression distant, almost solemn. You've seen objects like that before in museums, small bone or ivory runes, carved with the angular lines of the Old Norse alphabet. Some were charms, others game pieces, and some were used for something a little more mysterious. Historians still argue whether the Vikings truly practiced seer, an ancient form of Norse magic and divination, or whether that's been exaggerated by later storytellers. But either way, tales of seers, runecasters, and rituals echo through the sagas. The man by the hearth certainly looks the part. His cloak is dark, worn with age, the hem embroidered with symbols you can't quite decipher. His hair is streaked with gray, braided at the sides, and his eyes gleam sharp in the flickering light. You watch as he carefully lays the carved bone onto a small cloth, alongside other tokens, stones, feathers, bits of wood. It's a quiet, private ritual, one you suspect isn't meant for curious outsiders, but hey, you're technically just a sleepy fly on the wall. The rest of the longhouse remains still. Most of its occupants are asleep, their bodies curled beneath furs, faces barely visible beneath woolen blankets. You spot the child from earlier, the one with the carved wooden horse, now snuggled close to his mother, his small fingers still clutching the toy even in sleep. The old man mutters under his breath, his words lost beneath the crackle of the fire. His hands hover over the objects laid before him, fingers twitching, tracing invisible patterns in the air. It feels ancient. Older than the longhouse itself, older than the timber walls or dragon carvings. You imagine the generations who've sat by fires like this, seeking answers in bone and stone, reading the world like a story written across the sky and earth. You shift slightly, careful not to make a sound. It's oddly thrilling, being tucked in a quiet corner of history, watching an echo of the past unfold before you. The firelight catches on a small silver pendant hanging from the man's neck, a Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, unmistakable in its shape. It's more than jewelry. For the Norse, it's a protective symbol, a reminder of strength, thunder, and the favor of the gods. Of course, not everyone in the Viking world followed the old gods by this point in history. Christianity had begun to creep in from the south, carried by traders and, occasionally, raiders who returned with more than silver from distant shores. Historians still argue just how willingly the Norse embraced the new faith, whether it was a slow, grudging shift or a more practical, politically motivated adoption. Here, though, inside this smoky, timber-framed cocoon, the old ways feel alive and well. The man by the hearth finishes his quiet ritual. He gathers the tokens, wraps them in the cloth, and tucks them away into a leather pouch at his belt. His eyes sweep the room, and for a brief, unsettling moment, they land on you. You freeze, your heart giving a startled little jolt. But his expression is unreadable, neither welcoming nor hostile. Just knowing. As if he sees more than what's physically in front of him. A little shiver works its way down your spine, but it's not entirely unpleasant. It's the same thrill you get standing in ancient ruins or walking through a foggy forest, half expecting a ghost to step from behind a tree. The man rises, his joints creaking faintly as he moves toward the darker end of the longhouse. His steps are quiet, his figure melting into the shadows beyond the firelight. You exhale softly, your pulse slowing again as the space settles back into sleepy stillness. It strikes you how layered this longhouse is, not just physically, with its sleeping platforms and rafter storage, but culturally. It's a space for family, for work, for sleep, and for the quieter, stranger traditions that thread through Norse life like hidden roots beneath the soil. A faint breeze stirs the smoke overhead as someone adjusts the door covering, letting in a whisper of cold night air. The turf walls groan faintly in response, a reminder that even this sturdy shelter isn't entirely sealed from the wilds beyond. You wonder, briefly, what it must feel like to live here year-round, to ride out storm after storm, to face the dark winters with only firelight, furs, and faith to hold back the cold. The idea of it is daunting, but oddly appealing, too. There's a raw honesty to this life. Hard, yes. But unpretentious. Immediate. Your eyes grow heavy again as the longhouse breathes its slow, steady rhythm around you. The goat at your feet snuffles softly, its little body warm against yours. Above, the carved dragons peer down from the rafters, their eyes fixed and eternal. You let your mind drift, imagining sagas whispered around fires, sea voyages dreamed up beneath smoke-stained ceilings, and the quiet rituals tucked into the edges of daily life. Sleep pulls at you again, gentle and persistent. The longhouse hums. The embers glow. And somewhere, beyond the turf walls, the northern sky stretches on, vast, wild, and full of secrets yet to be whispered. Sleep claims you again, deep and heavy this time, like sinking into a snowbank that's somehow warm. But at some point, a faint scratching sound pricks at your awareness, a dry, rhythmic rasp, almost like sandpaper over wood. You crack one eye open, reluctant to leave your cozy little nest of furs and wool. The longhouse is still cloaked in shadows, though a faint glow edges the hearth as someone tends the fire. You roll onto your side, following the sound. In the far corner, an older woman crouches beside a low table, working a curved bone tool over a rough plank of wood. The faint scraping fills the quiet, steady and focused, like the purring of an ancient cat. She's making something. You squint, watching her hands as she carves shallow grooves into the plank. The shape is familiar, though it takes your sleepy brain a moment to place it: skis. She's carving skis. And suddenly, your modern mind does that thing where it tries to reconcile the image of ferocious, axe-wielding Vikings with the idea of graceful, snow-gliding winter commuters. But yes, skiing was absolutely part of Viking life, especially in regions like Norway and Sweden, where snow could bury the landscape for half the year. In fact, Norse mythology even boasts a ski god, Ullr, often depicted with a bow and skis, zipping through the icy forests like a Nordic action hero. Historians still argue how widespread practical skiing was among ordinary folk versus its use for sport, hunting, or warfare. But there's no denying the archaeological finds: ancient wooden skis preserved in bogs and ice, their designs eerily similar to modern ones. You shift onto your elbow, watching the woman work. Her face is lined, her hair streaked with silver, tied back in a neat braid. She hums softly to herself, a low tune that weaves through the rasp of her carving. Beside her sits a pot of oil, likely made from animal fat or fish. She'll coat the skis when they're finished to help repel moisture, an age-old technique that somehow feels just as relevant now as it did 1,000 years ago. Your brain briefly flickers to expensive waterproofing sprays in modern sporting goods stores, and you smile. The longhouse creaks as someone stirs on the far side. A man rises, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and slips outside through the heavy door covering. Cold air gusts in for a moment, crisp and sharp as a blade, carrying the faintest scent of pine and snow. You close your eyes again, picturing the world beyond these turf walls. It's still dark out, of course. The northern winter barely spares the land more than a few sluggish hours of daylight. The rest? A long, inky twilight stretching over frozen fields, snow-dusted forests, and the distant shimmer of the fjord. But the darkness doesn't halt life here, it just reshapes it. You imagine villagers moving between longhouses with lanterns or torches, bundled in wool cloaks, their boots crunching over packed snow. You picture hunters skimming across frozen marshes on skis, bows slung across their backs, scanning the horizon for deer or ptarmigan. Even the livestock adapt. The goats, sheep, and cattle huddle close together, their breath fogging in the frigid air, their winter coats thick and matted. Inside, the woman finishes her careful carving and sets the ski aside. Her hands are worn, calloused, every finger a map of work and winter. She reaches for a second plank, the shape already roughed out, and begins the same meticulous process: scrape, hum, scrape. A child stirs nearby, their small voice muffled beneath the furs. You glance over and catch sight of the little wooden horse again, clutched tight in a sleepy hand. It's a reminder that for all their ferocity in the sagas, the Vikings were still parents, siblings, neighbors, people who told stories, tucked in children, and quietly prepared for the days ahead. The hearth crackles softly as another log catches flame, casting warm, flickering light across the room. You spot the carved dragon beams again, their eyes gleaming in the glow, forever watching. You stretch under your wool blanket, considering the hours ahead. Soon, the longhouse will fully stir to life. Chores will begin: feeding animals, grinding grain, mending sails, shaping weapons. But for now, in this liminal space between sleep and dawn, it feels peaceful. The woman sets aside her tools, rubbing her hands together briskly. She tests the edges of the skis with a practiced eye, then reaches for the pot of oil. As she works, a faint, familiar aroma rises, the rich, almost fishy scent of seal or whale oil. It's not exactly your idea of a soothing candle scent, but in this world, it means waterproof tools, warm meals, lit lamps. Nothing is wasted here. Every bone, every hide, every scrap of wood is transformed into something useful. It's a level of resourcefulness that makes you rethink your own tendency to toss broken things or let leftovers languish in the fridge. Outside, the faintest glow edges the horizon, a sluggish promise of morning. The longhouse groans again as another gust rattles the walls, but inside, the space holds steady, warm and breathing like a living creature. The man who stepped out returns, stomping snow from his boots. He carries a small bundle of kindling, his breath fogging as he moves toward the hearth. A quiet exchange passes between him and the woman, simple words, probably mundane, but threaded with the easy rhythm of people who've weathered countless winters together. You curl deeper into your blankets, the rough wool scratching pleasantly against your skin, the pelt heavy over your shoulders. Your eyes drift shut again, lulled by the steady scrape of tools, the crackle of the fire, and the quiet hum of life pulsing through the longhouse. The world beyond remains vast, wild, and frozen. But here, inside these walls, is warmth, purpose, and a kind of steady, unshakable belonging. You sink into it, letting the sounds and sense of another life cradle you back toward sleep. The next time your eyes flutter open, there's movement all around you. The longhouse, once quiet and shadowy, has blossomed into a hive of early morning activity. The soft mumble of voices overlaps with the rhythmic thud of footsteps on packed earth. It's not chaotic, not quite, but there's a distinct sense that the day is unfolding, and everyone has a part to play. You stretch beneath your furs, blinking against the low, golden light filtering from the hearth. Someone must have added more wood while you dozed, because the flames crackle higher now, casting dancing shadows across the timber walls. The air smells faintly of smoke, wool, and, unexpectedly, something almost like porridge. You lift your head and spot a young woman near the fire, stirring a large pot hanging from a metal hook over the flames. The mixture inside bubbles gently, releasing the earthy, nutty scent of grains cooked in milk or water. Breakfast, Viking style. It's likely some kind of barley or oat porridge, maybe sweetened with a drizzle of honey or bits of dried berries if they're feeling fancy. Protein? Probably whatever's on hand, maybe a few strips of dried fish or smoked meat crumbled on top. You can almost hear a modern nutritionist nodding approvingly in the background. Simple. Filling. Zero processed sugar. Historians still argue exactly how diverse the Norse diet was, depending on the region and time period. Coastal settlements had access to fish, seaweed, and seabirds, while inland farms relied more on livestock, dairy, and hardy crops. One thing's clear, these people knew how to survive on what the land and sea provided. A boy trots past you carrying a wooden bucket, its contents sloshing faintly. You catch a glimpse inside, milk, still frothy, probably fresh from one of the goats or cows penned outside. Another young girl follows, balancing a stack of wooden bowls against her hip. The floor creaks as people shift and settle around the hearth for breakfast. They sit close, knees brushing, voices low and easy. There's no formal dining table here, just shared space, shared food, shared warmth. It feels familiar, in a way. Like a cozy campsite or a bustling hostel common room, strangers, friends, family, all drawn together by the simple human need to eat and connect. You shuffle upright, your blanket still wrapped around your shoulders like a makeshift cloak. No one pays much mind to your sleepy, wide-eyed state. They're too busy doling out portions of steaming porridge, passing bowls and spoons with efficient, practiced hands. A small boy flops down beside you with a wooden bowl nearly as big as his head. He offers you a sleepy grin, his cheeks pink from sleep, before digging in with gusto. You can't help but smile back. Across the room, you notice the older woman from earlier, the ski carver, now seated near the wall, methodically sewing what looks like a wool tunic. Her needle flashes in the firelight, pulling sturdy linen thread through thick fabric. In the Viking world, clothing wasn't just fashion, it was survival. Wool, linen, animal skins, all layered and tailored to ward off the relentless cold. And forget fast fashion, a single tunic might take weeks to weave, sew, and finish. You glance down at your own clothes, probably synthetic, machine-stitched, utterly unfit for a Norse winter, and feel a little underprepared. The longhouse doors creak open as a gust of frigid air snakes inside. A pair of men stomp in, their boots crusted with snow, arms laden with bundles of firewood. Their cheeks are ruddy, their beards frosted at the edges. One of them chuckles as he shakes the snow from his cloak, sending icy droplets scattering across the floor. Despite the cold and the hard work, there's a kind of rugged contentment etched into their faces, a quiet satisfaction in surviving another frozen night, in keeping the hearth burning and the longhouse supplied. They stack the wood near the fire, their boots thudding heavily, and accept bowls of porridge from the young woman by the hearth. One of them ruffles the boy's hair as he passes, earning an exaggerated scowl that quickly melts into a grin. You catch fragments of conversation, mentions of the fjord icing over, of deer tracks spotted near the woods, of the snow's stubborn grip on the fields. It's all practical, immediate, woven through with the quiet, stoic humor that feels universal to people living close to the edge of wilderness. A faint thrum of admiration bubbles up in your chest. It's easy to romanticize Viking life, the daring raids, the longships slicing through stormy seas, but here, inside these walls, it's the small, daily victories that matter most. A warm fire. A full belly. Dry clothes. Community. You pull your blanket tighter, savoring the earthy warmth of the longhouse. Near the wall, an older man with a braided beard sharpens an axe, the steady rasp of the whetstone slicing through the hum of voices. The axe head gleams in the firelight, its edge precise and unforgiving. Contrary to Hollywood's obsession with oversized, impractical battle axes, most Viking axes were versatile tools, used for splitting wood, shaping timber, or, yes, fighting when necessary. Lightweight, deadly, and utterly utilitarian. Historians still argue whether the stereotypical image of Vikings as axe-wielding berserkers holds up to scrutiny. Truth is, they were farmers, traders, explorers first, and warriors when the situation demanded. Outside, the faint sound of livestock carries through the walls, the low bleat of goats, the shuffling hooves of cattle. Someone's tending to the animals, likely milking or checking the pens, their muffled footsteps crunching over snow. You glance toward the door, considering the cold beyond. But honestly, you're in no rush to leave the cocoon of warmth and shared humanity that pulses inside these ancient walls. The breakfast chatter winds down as bowls are emptied and spoons set aside. The young woman by the hearth begins rinsing the used dishes in a small basin of melted snow, her movements brisk and efficient. Tasks await beyond the walls, firewood to gather, nets to mend, tools to sharpen, but for a fleeting moment, the longhouse feels still, suspended in its own quiet rhythm. You nestle back into your blanket, your eyes drifting shut again as the warmth, the muffled voices, and the steady beat of Norse life lull you toward sleep once more. Your next awakening is slower. The longhouse hums with quiet, industrious energy, like a living thing stretching and settling into the rhythm of the day. You blink at the timber beams above, the faint curls of smoke drifting lazily toward the high roof, and let your senses drift outward. The fire crackles low now, banked but still glowing. Outside, you can hear the faint whoosh of wind over the snow-packed ground and the muffled calls of voices working beyond the heavy door coverings. You pull the wool blanket closer, savoring the scratchy warmth against your chin, but curiosity itches at the edges of your sleep-fogged brain. You slip from your cozy nest, careful not to step on any limb sprawled nearby. Some people have already left, judging by the empty furs and the lingering scent of leather and snow on the air. Those who remain sit hunched over quiet tasks, mending clothes, carving wooden handles, braiding rope. Near the hearth, a man with arms like tree trunks leans over a thick plank of wood, his broad hand steady as he scrapes the surface smooth with a curved knife. You tilt your head, watching the familiar shape emerge, a shield, its circular form unmistakable even in its unfinished state. You can't help but smile. Viking shields have this legendary reputation, symbols of raiding, defense, and warrior pride, but up close, they're more than battlefield props. They're the product of painstaking craftsmanship. This one is made from overlapping planks of pine or spruce, fitted tightly together. The man tests the edge, squinting, then reaches for a strip of rawhide to reinforce the rim. Eventually, it'll be painted, maybe bright red or bold yellow, with patterns swirling like dragons or runes etched along the edges. Historians still argue about the specific designs and whether every shield bore intricate decorations or if that was reserved for wealthier warriors and ceremonial displays. Archaeological finds offer glimpses, but the details? That's where the scholarly debates thrive. Across the room, another man sits weaving cord from thin strips of leather, his fingers working with hypnotic precision. Rope and cordage are vital here, used for securing sails, binding tools, even hanging meats to dry. It's another reminder that while the longships get all the glory, it's the quieter, everyday crafts that hold Viking life together. A gust of cold sneaks in as the heavy door covering parts. Two figures return, stomping snow from their boots. Their cheeks glow red from the wind, their cloaks dusted in frost. One carries a bundle of firewood, the other a net heavy with fish that gleams silver in the low light. Ah, the spoils of a winter fishing trip. You watch as they haul their catch to a small wooden table, the soft thunk of fish hitting wood filling the space. The scent of brine and ice drifts through the longhouse, oddly comforting in its rawness. Salted fish will likely be part of dinner, maybe dried or smoked to preserve it longer. Not exactly your idea of fine dining, but after surviving Viking winter conditions, you're not feeling picky. You meander toward the hearth again, eyes tracing the room's small, clever details. Animal pelts nailed to the lower walls block drafts. Wooden pegs and hooks hold tools, cloaks, even bundles of herbs hanging upside down to dry. There's a faint aroma of juniper and smoke lingering in the air, blending with the musk of wool and leather. It's earthy, sharp, and oddly calming, better than most designer candles, honestly. At your feet, a small, shaggy dog ambles past, tail wagging lazily. Its fur is thick and unruly, clearly built for the cold, with sharp, intelligent eyes that flick toward you. You crouch, offering your hand, and it sniffs politely before trotting off, content with your presence. Dogs weren't just companions here, they guarded livestock, hunted, kept vermin at bay. And much like today, they were likely spoiled by the children and secretly fed scraps under the table when no one was looking. The longhouse creaks as the wind presses against its turf walls, but the structure holds steady. You think again about its design, the overlapping timber frame, insulated with packed earth and sod, sometimes lined with stone at the base. It's not glamorous, but it's genius in its practicality. Historians still argue how standardized longhouse construction was across Viking settlements, or whether it varied significantly by region, wealth, and available materials. But the essence remains, a shelter built to endure. A woman sits near the door now, shaping lengths of wool into yarn using a simple drop spindle. The soft twist of fibers forms a steady rhythm as she works, her fingers deft and practiced. You can't help but marvel at the patience involved. Spinning enough thread for even a single tunic would take hours, days, maybe weeks. Modern clothing factories churn out garments by the thousands, but here? Every stitch carries the quiet imprint of time, effort, and necessity. The man finishes binding the shield rim and holds it up, inspecting his work. The wood gleams faintly in the firelight, sturdy and proud. It's easy to picture that shield strapped to a warrior's arm, raised against the slash of a sword or the hail of arrows. But right now, it's just another task in the endless list of winter preparations. Outside, the faint sound of a child's laughter floats in, thin and bright against the muffled backdrop of snow and wind. You imagine the village beyond, the other longhouses huddled together, smoke curling from low chimneys, figures moving between chores. It's a hard life, no question. But here, nestled within these turf walls, it feels whole. Everyone contributing, everyone sharing warmth, food, and stories. The older woman with the spindle glances up, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she catches your gaze. She says something in Old Norse, soft, melodic, utterly foreign to your ears, but the tone is unmistakable. A gentle reminder. Rest. Stay warm. You're safe here. You settle back down on your furs, the fire's glow brushing your skin as the longhouse hums with quiet life. Outside, the winter may rage. But inside, for now, the world is softened by wool, wood, and the enduring rhythm of hands crafting the tools that hold everything together. Time passes strangely inside a Viking longhouse. It's hard to tell if it's midday or evening, the dim winter light outside barely making a dent in the smoky glow of the hearth. The steady hum of activity continues, like the pulse of a living creature, and you've fallen into its rhythm without even realizing it. You stretch beneath the heavy wool blankets, watching as a group of men near the fire huddle over what looks like a worn piece of animal hide stretched flat on the floor. Their voices rise and fall, low and serious, punctuated by the occasional chuckle or sharp exclamation. Curious, you shuffle closer, careful not to trip over the scattered tools and stray furs littering the floor. As you lean in, the men part slightly, revealing the hide, and what's etched across its surface. A map. It's crude by modern standards, no neat grids, no GPS coordinates, but you can make out jagged coastlines, the curves of fjords, and clusters of runic markings. It's more memory than measurement, a stitched-together tapestry of the world as they know it. Historians still argue about how advanced Norse cartography really was. Some believe they relied mostly on oral navigation and landmark memory, while others suggest they possessed surprisingly sophisticated mapping skills for their time. Either way, the knowledge was real, and the confidence with which they set sail across vast, icy seas proves it. One of the men traces his finger along a winding path, murmuring under his breath. You catch fragments, references to Iceland, perhaps even the distant shores of Vinland, the semi-mythical land across the Western Ocean. There's a spark in his eyes, that mix of longing and pride reserved for those who've conquered the unknown. It hits you, these aren't just warriors or farmers. They're explorers. Traders. Dreamers wrapped in wool and leather, staring out at the edges of their world and wondering what lies beyond. A broad-shouldered man with an intricately braided beard laughs, tapping the map as he launches into what's clearly a well-worn tale. The others lean in, grinning, the tension of winter momentarily forgotten. You recognize the cadence of a good story, even if the language slips past your understanding. The gestures, the chuckles, the wide eyes, they all translate. You settle onto a nearby bench, letting the warmth of the fire and the comfort of shared storytelling wash over you. There's something ancient and grounding about it, the way stories bind people, softening the edges of a hard life. Around this hearth, tales of raids, lost ships, strange lands, and heroic ancestors flow like ale at a feast. Nearby, the older woman with the spindle chuckles softly, spinning her yarn without missing a beat. You wonder how many times she's heard these same stories, how many generations have passed them along like whispered secrets. The longhouse creaks as the wind presses against its walls again, a reminder that outside these timber bones, the world is unforgiving. But inside, laughter curls through the smoke, and the fire crackles steadily. A boy with tangled blonde hair scampers over, clutching what looks like a carved wooden figure. He plops down beside you, proudly holding it up for your inspection. It's rough but recognizable, a squat, broad-chested figure with a tiny hammer clutched in its hands. You grin. Thor. Little figures like this, amulets, carvings, charms, were common among Norse families. Some hung from belts or neck cords, others tucked into corners of the home. Protection, luck, a reminder of the gods watching over them. Forget Marvel movies, this Thor feels closer to the roots, the protector of mankind, the thunder wielder, both fierce and oddly comforting. Historians still argue over how widespread personal religious icons were, especially among ordinary folk. But in homes like this, with danger lurking beyond every snowbank, a little divine backup couldn't hurt. The boy beams as you admire the carving, then dashes off, tucking Thor safely into a leather pouch at his waist. You lean back, taking in the longhouse again. The beams overhead sag slightly under the weight of snow and sod, their weathered surfaces marked by generations of hands, tools, and smoke. Furs and cloaks hang along the walls, drying after days exposed to sleet and wind. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, damp wool, and that faint, ever-present hint of salt and fish. Another gust rattles the door, but no one flinches. The longhouse holds. Outside, faint voices carry, a woman calling to someone near the animal pens, the distant creak of wooden gates, the shuffle of hooves in packed snow. You picture the settlement beyond these walls, small clusters of longhouses, storage sheds, animal enclosures, maybe a smithy or two. Not grand by modern standards, but sturdy, enduring, a testament to survival in this harsh, frozen corner of the world. A man passes by with a heavy cloak slung over his shoulder, pausing to grab a length of rope from a wall peg. His boots creak faintly, their soles stitched with care, reinforced against the cold. You admire the craftsmanship, the layered leather, the sturdy seams. Everything here speaks of function honed over generations. Historians still argue about the extent of Norse craftsmanship's reach, how far their trade network sprawled, what exotic goods filtered into even remote settlements. But there's no debate about their skill. You see it in every carved spoon, every stitched tunic, every glinting bead of amber tucked into braids. The fire pops as someone stokes the embers, casting new shadows across the longhouse. You spot the ski carver from earlier, now sharpening the wooden runners of a nearly finished ski. It reminds you again of how these people don't just endure the winter, they navigate it with ingenuity and determination. Even sleep, here, is an act of adaptation. The furs piled high, the shared body heat, the careful placement of beds close to the fire, it's all designed for survival, but wrapped in the quiet comfort of routine. You pull your blanket closer, the edges of weariness softening your limbs again. The voices around you drift into a gentle hum, the low murmur of stories, the scrape of tools, the steady spinning of wool. Your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the warmth, the smoke, and the quiet heartbeat of the longhouse. Outside, the frozen world waits. But inside, wrapped in wool and stories, you drift gently back towards sleep. When you wake again, it's hard to say how much time has passed. The longhouse feels quieter now, not silent, but hushed in that way that tells you evening is creeping in, or maybe it's just the deepening of winter's ever-present gloom. The fire has been stoked higher, flames licking up to cast warm, flickering light across the timber beams. The glow reveals the faint, curling smoke trailing toward the smoke hole in the ceiling, and you smile drowsily at the familiar sight. That smoky haze? It's part of life here, like the chill in your toes or the constant scent of leather. Around you, preparations for the evening meal are underway. Clay pots clink together, the dull thud of wooden spoons against bowls filling the air. A woman near the hearth tends to a large iron pot suspended over the flames, stirring the contents with the steady rhythm of someone who's done this 1,000 times. The smell wafts toward you, earthy, savory, rich with herbs, root vegetables, maybe a bit of dried meat or fish thrown in. Viking cuisine doesn't exactly top modern menus, but right now, that bubbling stew smells like pure comfort. Historians still argue over how varied Norse diets were depending on class and geography. Coastal folk had fish in abundance, while inland farmers relied more on livestock and hardy crops. But everyone shared a simple, pragmatic relationship with food, whatever kept you warm, full, and alive through another winter. Your stomach growls softly, reminding you that your own survival instincts are fully on board with stew. A girl with braided hair passes by carrying a small stack of wooden bowls. She flashes you a curious glance, your presence still a novelty, though no longer alarming. You smile, and she offers the faintest grin in return before continuing on. You rise, stretching beneath the low ceiling beams, and shuffle toward the hearth, drawn by the warmth and the scent of food. People sit clustered nearby, men, women, children, huddled in small groups, sharing quiet conversations as they wait. A heavy hand lands on your shoulder, and you glance up to see one of the older men, weathered face, wild beard, eyes twinkling with that mix of curiosity and Viking bluntness. He gestures toward the stew pot, saying something in Old Norse that your brain translates roughly to, "You eating or just standing there looking cold?" Fair enough. A few moments later, you're holding a carved wooden bowl filled with steaming stew. You settle onto a low bench, tucking your legs beneath you as the warmth seeps into your hands. The stew is thick and rustic, chunks of turnip, wild onion, and tender shreds of meat floating in a rich, savory broth. Not gourmet, but hearty, filling, and exactly what this place demands. As you eat, your eyes wander across the room, tracing the subtle rituals of evening settling over the longhouse. Blankets are rearranged, cloaks hung to dry near the fire. Small groups chat softly, the day's work winding down. Outside, you can hear the muffled whimper of the wind, rattling faintly at the door coverings. It's easy to forget, for a moment, the sheer brutality of the landscape beyond these turf walls. Inside, there's warmth, food, companionship, the bare essentials wrapped in a layer of rough-edged comfort. A man nearby produces a small, round instrument from a leather pouch, a bone flute, its surface etched with simple carvings. He raises it to his lips, and the first notes drift through the smoky air, soft, lilting, carrying the unmistakable thread of ancient music. It's haunting, beautiful in its simplicity, and you can't help but close your eyes, letting the melody wash over you. Historians still argue about how widespread musical traditions were in Viking daily life, beyond the famous war songs and bardic tales. But instruments like lyres, flutes, and simple stringed pieces have been found in excavations, hinting that music wasn't reserved for feasts or battle marches. It was part of the ordinary rhythm of survival. The flute player finishes, and the quiet hum of conversation resumes. You scrape the last of your stew from the bowl, content, as the longhouse settles into its evening state. A man and woman near the door untangle thick wool cloaks, brushing snow from the fabric. It seems they've just returned from outside, their cheeks flushed, boots heavy with frost. They exchange a few words with the others, then begin unpacking a small bundle of goods, firewood, smoked fish, and something wrapped in animal hide. The wrapped item is carefully unbundled, revealing its contents, a chunk of hard, pale cheese. You blink, a little surprised. Cheese in the Viking Age isn't exactly something you'd expect, but archaeological digs have confirmed it. Basic dairy products like butter, curd, and hard cheese made their way into the Norse diet, especially among those with access to livestock. It's the kind of quirky, mundane detail that brings the place to life. Vikings didn't just live for battle and exploration, they milked goats, churned butter, made cheese. The little victories of domestic life, fought quietly against the backdrop of an unforgiving climate. The cheese is shared in small slices among the family, passed around with the casual generosity of people who understand scarcity. No waste, no excess, just enough to nourish and carry on. You sink deeper into your spot by the hearth, the flickering flames casting shadows that dance along the turf walls. The fire crackles, sending the occasional ember drifting upward like a fleeting star. Nearby, a small child tugs on her father's sleeve, pointing upward at the rafters. You follow her gaze and spot them, bundles of herbs and dried plants suspended from the beams, their silhouettes swaying gently in the smoky haze. Juniper, angelica, maybe even meadowsweet. These weren't just for cooking, they held medicinal uses, warding off illness or serving as primitive remedies. Historians still debate how much true medical knowledge the Norse possessed versus folk superstition, but either way, they fought winter's threats with everything at their disposal. A dog pads past you again, curling near the fire. Its fur is thick, its eyes drooping with contentment as it settles into sleep. Another small reminder that this isn't just a structure of wood and turf, it's a home, built on shared survival, quiet moments, and the small, stubborn joys of ordinary life. You pull your blanket tighter, the edges of fatigue creeping in as the longhouse darkens. Beyond the walls, the snow whispers down, the northern wind howls softly, but within these beams and turf, there's warmth, food, music, and the quiet, enduring heartbeat of the Viking hearth. The hours drift by, soft and fluid like the smoke curling toward the rafters. You're not sure if it's late evening or early night, the lines blur inside a Viking longhouse, where time folds around the glow of the hearth and the hush of winter outside. Your body feels heavy with warmth and food, but your mind stays quietly alert, drinking in the last fragments of the day's routine. Around you, people settle into their nightly rhythm. Some still murmur in low voices, others have already curled beneath furs, eyes closed, breath steady. The soft snores of a sleeping child rise and fall like the gentle rocking of a boat. You shift on your bedding, adjusting the thick wool blanket around your shoulders. It's scratchy in places, but you barely notice anymore. The smoky air, the layers of fur, the faint scent of peat and herbs, all of it has become strangely comforting, like slipping into an old, familiar sweater. Near the door, someone carefully bars the entrance for the night, sliding a thick wooden beam into place with a satisfying clunk. Outside, the wind rattles faintly against the walls, but the longhouse stands solid, defiant. It's weathered storms far worse than this. You glance upward, your eyes tracing the heavy timber beams crossing the ceiling. From one of them hangs a curious object, a small bundle of twigs, bound with leather cord, suspended by a thin strip of wool. It sways gently as the wind breathes against the walls. A charm. Maybe for protection, maybe for luck, maybe for keeping mischievous spirits at bay. Historians still argue over the full spectrum of Norse superstitions, how deeply they believed in land spirits, trolls, or house wights, but there's no doubt they practiced small, ritual acts to sway the unseen forces around them. And honestly, when winter sinks its claws in this deep, who wouldn't hedge their bets with a little magic? The longhouse creaks softly as people shift in their sleep. The dog near the hearth stirs, lets out a low grunt, then settles again. The embers glow faint and red, casting a subtle warmth that radiates through the dim space. A figure moves past you, one of the women, wrapped in a dark cloak, carrying a small clay lamp. Its tiny flame flickers as she pads quietly toward a corner of the longhouse you hadn't explored yet. Curiosity tugs at you, and you rise, careful not to disturb the others. You follow her with light steps, your blanket still wrapped around your shoulders like a makeshift cloak. The corner reveals a low, wooden chest, its surface carved with knotwork patterns, simple but skillful. The woman kneels beside it, opens the lid with practiced care, and begins to remove a few items: folded linen, a small bag of herbs, a stone pendant. You hang back, respectful, observing. She seems to be tending to something important, maybe preparing for travel, or perhaps organizing personal belongings with the quiet ritual of someone safeguarding their most treasured things. A small, woven cloth catches your eye, a square embroidered with intricate, geometric designs. It's more delicate than the rough wool blankets, clearly crafted with care and patience. Not purely decorative, but not purely practical either. Maybe it's meant for special occasions, a small piece of beauty tucked among the survival tools of daily life. Historians still debate how much artistry permeated ordinary Viking homes versus what we see in museums. The surviving jewelry, wood carvings, and tapestries suggest a people who valued craftsmanship deeply, even when living on the edge of the known world. The woman notices your gaze and offers a faint smile, holding the cloth up briefly before tucking it carefully away. No words needed, the pride is clear. You return to your spot near the hearth, the hush of the longhouse wrapping around you once more. Sleep tugs at the edges of your mind, but you resist, savoring the final moments of wakefulness. The fire has burned low, mostly glowing coals now, casting a soft, ruddy light across the sleeping forms huddled beneath blankets and furs. The dog lifts its head briefly, eyes half-lidded, then sighs and curls tighter into its warm nest. From beyond the walls comes a faint, haunting sound, the long, distant call of an owl echoing across the frozen land. Its voice rises and falls, eerie and beautiful, a reminder that even in this deep wilderness, life stirs beneath the snow. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The owl's call fades, replaced by the whisper of wind against the sod walls, the occasional creak of timber, the gentle, steady breathing of the longhouse's inhabitants. The warmth of the fire, the weight of the blankets, the steady hum of safety lull you toward sleep again. Your body relaxes, the rough wool beneath you strangely comfortable now. And as you drift, you picture the longhouse from above, the dark shape huddled against the snowy expanse, smoke trailing skyward like a fragile thread connecting this small pocket of warmth to the vast, frozen world beyond. It's not grand. It's not glamorous. But it's shelter. It's family. It's survival stitched together from timber, turf, and stubborn determination. You wonder briefly what it would be like to truly live here, to wake with the sun, when it appears, to tend animals, haul water, patch roofs, trade at distant markets, sail across icy seas. To face winter not with the luxury of heated homes and modern convenience, but with layers of wool, a sturdy roof, and a quiet faith in firelight and family. Historians still argue whether Viking settlements were harsh prisons of necessity or resilient havens carved out by grit and skill. Lying here, cocooned in warmth while winter snarls outside, it feels like both, and neither. It feels human, flawed, enduring, familiar in ways that transcend time. Your eyelids grow heavier, the last embers pulsing softly across your vision. Sleep curls around you like the longhouse itself, solid, protective, carrying you gently into the quiet dark. The dreamless sleep holds you for what feels like hours, or maybe just minutes. It's impossible to tell in the timeless haze of the longhouse. But eventually, your eyes flutter open to faint movement, the world around you awash in soft shadows and low, sleepy murmurs. It's still dark, though a faint hint of deep blue presses against the cracks around the door coverings, a sign that dawn, or at least the idea of dawn, is creeping back across the winter sky. The fire has been tended again. Its embers glow brighter, casting long, lazy shadows along the walls and across the sleeping bodies nearby. Someone moves quietly through the space, rearranging blankets, adjusting furs, tossing a few more sticks onto the hearth. Their footsteps are feather-light on the packed earth floor. You stretch beneath your woolen blanket, your joints stiff but not cold. The insulation of bodies, turf walls, and steady fire has worked its quiet magic through the long night. The longhouse smells the same as before, smoke, wool, faint animal musk, but there's something new now. A sharper scent tucked beneath the earthy warmth, the faint, sweet bitterness of ale being poured, and the crackling aroma of bread warming over the embers. Breakfast is coming. As you sit up, you notice others stirring, too. A young boy rubs sleep from his eyes, his cheeks pink from the warmth. A woman, hair in disheveled braids, kneels by the fire, carefully placing flat rounds of dough onto a heated stone. They hiss softly as they cook. Historians still argue over the details of Viking breakfasts, whether they leaned more toward hearty meals or quick, simple fare before the day's labor began. But bread, ale, and sometimes dried fish or porridge seem to have been common, at least for those fortunate enough to have stored enough through winter. The ale here isn't the boozy Viking party fuel of TV shows. It's weak by modern standards, barely alcoholic, often safer than questionable water, and easier to produce than you might expect. Everyone drinks it, even children. It's just part of daily life, like wool cloaks or smoky air. Someone hands you a wooden cup filled with the lukewarm brew. It tastes faintly of grain and yeast, earthy, plain, surprisingly comforting. The bread, once offered, is dense and chewy, laced with what you think might be seeds or nuts. It's not gourmet, but it fills the belly and fuels the day. The dog stretches, yawns wide enough to flash its teeth, then pads toward the door, sniffing at the edge of the fur coverings. Outside, you can hear the muted sounds of the village coming to life, low voices, the clank of buckets, the bleat of goats, and somewhere distant, the rhythmic chop of an axe biting into frozen wood. You rise, curiosity tugging at your heavy limbs, and drift toward the door. The covering is lifted momentarily as someone steps inside, letting a blast of icy air cut through the warmth. You seize the opportunity and slip out. The village beyond the longhouse sprawls in quiet, rugged simplicity, clusters of similar turf-roofed homes, their outlines blending with the snowy landscape. Smoke curls lazily from several roofs, the haze of shared survival hanging over the settlement like a soft veil. The air bites your cheeks, crisp and sharp, but the sight before you tugs a grin to your face. Across the open space, bundled figures haul water from a partially frozen stream. A group of children chase each other in the snow, their wool cloaks flapping as they tumble and laugh. Near the animal pens, a man mends a wooden fence, his breath misting in the cold air. And above it all, the sky glows faintly pink at the edges, a stubborn promise that even in this bleak season, the sun hasn't abandoned the world entirely. It's beautiful in a raw, unfiltered way. Harsh, yes, but honest. The Viking settlement isn't just a story of axes and battles, it's woven from the small, relentless acts of survival, the water hauling, the fire tending, the bread baking, the fence mending. You shuffle back toward the longhouse, your feet crunching over the packed snow. As you re-enter, the warmth hits you like a gentle wave, pulling a sigh from your chest. Inside, the morning meal continues. More bread, more ale, and the rhythmic scrape of someone sharpening a tool near the fire. Another person braids lengths of rope from twisted fibers, their fingers working with automatic precision. You settle back onto your blanket, watching, listening. This is the quiet heartbeat of the Viking world, ordinary, repetitive, yet steeped in resilience. Above you, the ceiling beams hold their familiar burden of drying herbs and tucked-away tools. Your eyes drift to a new addition you hadn't noticed before, a small, carved figure resting on a ledge near the rafters. It's a simple wooden likeness, rough around the edges but unmistakable in form, a figure believed to represent Thor, god of strength, storms, and protection. His hammer is etched clearly into the carving, a tiny defiance against the chaos of the world outside. Historians still debate whether small household idols like this were purely decorative, ritual objects, or deeply spiritual to the average Norse family. But there's little doubt that faith, whether in gods, fate, or the power of community, was braided tightly into Viking daily life. A young girl notices your gaze and leans over with a whisper, saying something that roughly translates to, "He watches the door." Her smile is shy but proud, and you return it with quiet amusement. A few final bites of bread, a last sip of ale, and the morning settles into its steady rhythm. Outside, the sun's faint light creeps higher, casting long, soft beams through the cracks around the door. The dog curls near the hearth again, tail thumping once before sleep claims it. You pull your blanket around your shoulders, a sleepy smile teasing your lips. It's still cold outside. The world is still wild and unforgiving. But in here? In here, the Longhouse holds steady. Warmth, food, stories, and small carved gods watching the door, it's all woven together into a simple, stubborn sanctuary. And as your body drifts once more toward sleep, lulled by the steady hum of Viking morning, you know you'll carry this memory, a nap inside a longhouse, wrapped in the quiet strength of ancient survival, with you, wherever your dreams take you. The warmth of the longhouse, the steady crackle of the hearth, and the soft weight of woolen blankets have all done their work. You feel yourself drifting once more into that half-sleep place, the borderland where your body stays tucked in safety, but your mind floats, lazy and curious. The sounds around you soften, the muffled conversation, the shuffle of feet, the faint clink of tools. Even the dog's occasional sigh becomes a distant, rhythmic murmur. This time, your eyes stay closed as you let your other senses take over. The longhouse breathes around you, the heavy timber beams creaking gently as the structure settles. You can practically hear the snow piled on the roof, pressing down in patient silence, the outside world locked away behind sod walls and stubborn craftsmanship. You think about how much work went into building this place. The felled trees, stripped of bark and carved into beams. The sod cut from the earth itself, layered over the frame to insulate against the brutal cold. The woven mats of reed and thatch tucked beneath, all pieced together with practiced, communal effort. Historians still argue how standardized Viking longhouses were. Some say there was a shared blueprint across Scandinavia, others insist local resources and traditions shaped each home uniquely. But lying here, you suspect the truth is both, a mix of clever design passed down through generations and the gritty improvisation demanded by each harsh, unpredictable season. Your fingers trace the edge of your blanket absent-mindedly, the coarse wool rough against your skin. Even the fabric tells a story. The sheep were raised nearby, sheared, their wool spun and woven by hands like those bustling around you now. Nothing arrives easily here, not warmth, not food, not shelter. A faint vibration hums beneath your body as someone walks past, their footsteps transferring through the packed earth floor. You peek one eye open, catching a glimpse of daily life unfolding as steadily as the snow outside. By the hearth, a man repairs a leather harness, the worn strap stretched between his calloused hands. Nearby, two children play with carved wooden figures, a miniature ship, a tiny horse, their small voices weaving tales of adventure that feel eerily close to the real thing in this world of traders, raiders, and stormy seas. And in the far corner, a woman weaves fibers into cord, her fingers deft and sure. You recognize her from last night, the one who tended to the wooden chest, who handled the delicate cloth with such quiet pride. It strikes you again how layered this place is. It's not just walls and beams, it's stories tucked into every crevice. Tools passed down, charms hung with quiet hope, scars etched into the timber from years of fierce winters and rowdy celebrations. You close your eyes again, letting the warmth wrap around you, your thoughts drifting. Funny, isn't it? For all the Hollywood versions of Vikings, hulking warriors, roaring battles, endless feasts, the reality feels so much softer here. Not gentle, exactly. Life is too hard for that. But steady. Practical. Rooted in family, survival, and small comforts stolen from the jaws of winter. Outside, the wind kicks up again, whistling faintly through cracks in the walls. The door covering rustles, but the heavy wooden bar holds firm. You imagine the snow swirling across the village, coating the roofs, burying the fields, pressing against the walls like a quiet, persistent predator. But in here, you're safe. The Longhouse is more than timber and turf, it's defiance. A declaration that no matter how fierce the winter, how long the dark, these people, and for now, you, endure. The fire pops softly, sending a brief spark upward. Above, the rafters stretch across the ceiling like the ribs of a sleeping beast. Herbs still hang drying, tools tucked neatly on ledges, charms swaying in unseen drafts. You spot another carved figure, this one rougher, its features vague, likely a simple offering to the land spirits or house wights. Historians still puzzle over the day-to-day rituals of Norse households. Were these small idols sincere expressions of belief? Tokens of habit? Or just hopeful insurance against the capriciousness of fate? Hard to say. But in this moment, nestled under the low ceiling with the fire's glow pulsing softly, you get it. When the world outside is so wild and indifferent, you grab hold of every scrap of control you can, whether it's a carved god, a lucky charm, or a well-tended hearth. You drift in and out of sleep, the edges of your awareness feathering gently. The dog stirs beside the fire again, curling tighter. A child giggles quietly. Someone hums a low tune, simple, melodic, the kind of song that weaves itself into daily life unnoticed, lingering long after the notes fade. Eventually, the sounds blur, the world softens, and your breathing slows to match the steady, ancient rhythm of the Longhouse. The hours pass without you noticing. Maybe it's midday. Maybe the low light is just the stubborn winter sun peeking briefly through thick clouds. It doesn't matter. Time feels melted here, shaped more by the pulse of firelight and the rhythm of chores than by ticking clocks. And slowly, steadily, your thoughts drift outward, away from wool blankets and carved charms, toward the broader world these walls protect you from. The fjords, carved deep and cold into the land. The forests thick with evergreens, their branches heavy with snow. The longboats bobbing at the icy shoreline, their carved prows grinning at the frozen horizon. Somewhere out there, warriors sharpen axes. Traders tally their goods. Storytellers weave sagas beside other fires in other longhouses. But here, inside this sturdy, smoky shelter, you found the quiet heart of it all. The simple, steadfast act of surviving winter with warmth, bread, and the low murmur of voices sharing the space. And finally, your body gives in completely. Your breath deepens, your muscles slacken, and the soft weight of blankets pins you comfortably in place. As you slide fully into sleep, the Longhouse stands strong around you, a cocoon of timber, turf, and stubborn hope, carrying you safely through another ancient, frozen night. The Longhouse fades slowly from your mind now, like the last ember slipping into ash, leaving behind only the warmth and the quiet hum of survival. You can still feel it, though, the weight of the wool blankets, the faint scent of smoke lingering on your skin, the sturdy rhythm of life unfolding behind those turf walls. Outside, the snow may still fall, the wind may still whisper across the frozen earth, but in here, in your memory, it's calm, steady, safe. Let your thoughts settle now, like the quiet drift of snowflakes. Let your breathing slow, deep and easy, matching the gentle pulse of that ancient fire, flickering softly in your mind's eye. No need to hold on to the details anymore, the carved charms, the rough wool, the quiet, sleepy murmur of voices, they'll stay tucked safely in the corners of your memory, ready to return whenever you want them. For now, just drift. Let sleep fold over you like those heavy blankets. Let the soft rhythm of history carry you deeper, easing your body and mind into stillness. You've walked through time tonight. You've rested in the quiet shelter of a Viking longhouse. And now, it's time to rest fully, knowing that the ancient world, and your warm little corner of it, will be waiting for you whenever you need it again. Sleep well. Dream easy. You've earned it.